Imagine getting a message on a Saturday night. Hey, we're all going to that new place downtown. It's packed, but the vibe is amazing. For some people, that message feels exciting. Crowded room, loud music, dozens of conversations, energy everywhere. But for others, the reaction is completely different. Their brain instantly calculates the cost of that environment and quietly decides it's not worth it. Not because they dislike people, not because they hate fun, but because something in their nervous system reacts very differently to crowded spaces. Before we go further, comment where you're watching from and tell me honestly, do you feel energized in crowds or do you feel drained by them? Because this difference isn't random. Psychologists have been studying it for years, and the explanation is more fascinating than most people realize. To understand what's happening, we have to start with how the brain processes stimulation. Every environment sends information into your nervous system. Sounds, voices, movement, facial expressions, lighting, music, background conversations. Most people's brains filter a large percentage of this information automatically. Think of it like a built-in spam filter. A crowded room might contain hundreds of sensory inputs, but the brain quietly ignores most of them. It focuses only on what seems important. But some people's brains don't filter information as aggressively. Instead, they process much more of the incoming data. Psychologists call this trait sensory processing sensitivity. People with this trait tend to notice subtle details others overlook. Small shifts in tone during conversation, tiny changes in someone's facial expression, background sounds that most people barely register, the energy in a room, the emotional atmosphere of a group. Their nervous systems simply collect more information, which means environments that feel normal to others can feel overwhelming much faster. Imagine two people walking into the same crowded space. One brain filters 90% of the noise. The other processes most of it. One person experiences a busy room. The other experiences a flood of sensory input. Same environment, completely different internal experience. Researchers estimate that roughly 20% of the population falls into this highly sensitive category. That means about 1 in 5 people naturally processes the world with heightened awareness. And this trait comes with both advantages and challenges. One challenge is obvious. Crowds can feel exhausting, not necessarily because of the people themselves, but because the brain is working much harder to process everything happening at once. Every conversation, every movement, every subtle emotional signal. Over time, that processing creates mental fatigue, which is why someone might enjoy the first hour of a social event and then suddenly feel completely drained. Their brain battery simply runs out sooner. But there's another interesting psychological layer here. It's not just sensory input. It's emotional perception. Some people are unusually skilled at reading emotional cues. Psychologists sometimes describe this as high perceptual sensitivity. They pick up on unspoken tension. They notice when someone is uncomfortable. They sense when a conversation shifts emotionally. And when you place someone with that level of perception into a crowded room, something interesting happens. They're not just managing their own experience. They're unconsciously reading the emotional signal of dozens of people at once. The nervous laugh from across the room. The awkward pause in a nearby conversation. The tension between two people standing close together. Even if they're not consciously analyzing it, the brain is still registering these signals, which can make crowded environments feel emotionally intense. It's like having an emotional radar that never turns off. while others are casually socializing. Your brain is constantly detecting subtle social information. That level of awareness can be valuable. It often makes people more empathetic, more thoughtful, more emotionally intelligent, but it also requires more recovery time. Another reason crowds drain some people involves the brain's reward system. The chemical dopamine plays a big role in how we experience stimulation. For people who thrive in social environments, crowds trigger dopamine responses. Conversation, movement, new interactions. These experiences activate the brain's reward circuits, which makes the environment feel exciting and energizing. But for people who prefer quieter environments, dopamine doesn't always respond the same way. Instead of excitement, the brain may interpret high stimulation as stress. The nervous system becomes alert rather than energized. That's why some people feel mentally sharper and more creative when they're alone. Their brains respond more strongly to internal stimulation. Thinking, reading, exploring ideas, deep conversations. Solitude allows their reward system to activate in ways that crowded environments do not. And this leads to one of the biggest misunderstandings about people who avoid crowds. They're often labeled antisocial. But antisocial behavior actually means a lack of concern for other people. Most people who prefer solitude care deeply about others. They simply prefer smaller social environments. One meaningful conversation, a quiet dinner with a close friend, a deep discussion late at night, instead of large groups where conversations remain surface level. It's not a dislike of people. It's a preference for depth over volume. There's another factor that often surprises people: emotional absorption. Humans have mirror neurons in the brain. These neurons help us understand other people's emotions by internally simulating them. When you see someone laugh, your brain subtly mirrors the emotion. When you see someone stressed, your brain registers it. For most people, this process remains balanced. But for highly empathetic individuals, the mirroring can be stronger. They don't just observe emotions, they feel them more deeply. Place someone like this in a crowded environment, and something unusual happens. They may unconsciously absorb emotional signals from multiple people. Excitement, stress, awkwardness, energy, fatigue, all blending together. After several hours, their nervous system feels overloaded, which explains why someone might enjoy a gathering but need quiet time afterward to reset. This isn't weakness. It's simply how their nervous system regulates emotional information. Interestingly, people who prefer solitude often show strengths in other areas. Research suggests they tend to spend more time in reflective thinking. They analyze experiences deeply. They explore ideas more thoroughly. Many creative insights occur during periods of quiet concentration. Writers, artists, scientists, inventors, many report that their best ideas appear during moments of solitude rather than social stimulation. That's because the brain's default mode network becomes more active when external input decreases. This network is associated with imagination, self-reflection, and problem-solving. In other words, quiet environments allow certain kinds of thinking to flourish, which means choosing solitude isn't necessarily avoiding life. Sometimes it's the opposite. It's choosing the environment where your mind works best. Of course, there is a difference between healthy solitude and isolation. Healthy solitude feels restorative. You leave it feeling calm, focused, or inspired. Isolation feels heavy, disconnected, lonely, Most people who simply prefer smaller social environments experience the first kind. They enjoy time with others, just in smaller doses. And that's something modern culture often misunderstands, because modern life frequently celebrates constant activity. Large gatherings, busy schedules, endless interaction. But human brains were never designed to respond the same way to every environment. Some people thrive in stimulation. Others thrive in stillness. Both are normal. Both are natural. They simply reflect different nervous system settings. So when someone declines an invitation to a crowded event, it doesn't necessarily mean they're avoiding life. It might mean they understand how their brain works. They know what environments drain them and what environments restore them. And that kind of self-awareness is actually a sign of emotional intelligence, because human behavior often seems strange until you understand the systems behind it. Crowds energize some minds. Quiet spaces energize others. Both are simply ways the brain tries to stay balanced. Now here's something to think about. The next time someone says they'd rather stay home than attend a crowded event, you might realize they're not rejecting people. They're protecting their mental energy. And once you really see that clearly, it starts to connect to how people manage attention, relationships, and energy in ways most never question. And if that clicked for you, you're already picking up on patterns most people overlook.